Now, Andrew, you had that suspected case down in Poole. Was that a bit of a catalyst to get farmers motivated last year?
Yeah, I think what it did for us, Peter, was basically brought us into the protection zone. That was the physical thing that it did. So it imposed movement restrictions, but it also probably just reinforced the fact that we were a lot closer to what was a really worrying disease than we actually thought we were.
Now, that sense of urgency, do you think it still exists and people are keen to vaccinate again this year?
Yes, our clients are very informed about the situation. They had a lot of information last year. They responded very positively, and we had a good vaccination uptake and a good vaccination rollout. They understand and they sort of picked up the message that this disease is something that we could certainly need to avoid, and vaccination is the only really effective control measure against it. Information is again going out again this year. People have been very, very positive. Again, our orders are coming in. People are looking to vaccinate. They understand that we need to protect our stock against it. And so, yes, in answer to your question, I'm very confident that we'll have a good uptake again for this year.
Good. And you're fresh back from an international conference in Amsterdam, and obviously there's Bluetongues raging on the continent, in particular strains 1 and 6 as well as 8. What was the feeling out there, and how are they coping with strains 1 and 6?
And one of the biggest messages was that if we hadn't vaccinated in the south of England last year, we would certainly have had disease in the UK, and that was quite a sobering thought. And the other key message that I took from that was that Bluetongue virus serotype 8 is actually a very unpredictable organism. It's not behaving as other Bluetongue virus serotypes have behaved in the past. And I think we mustn't assume anything. It is very dangerous to predict that it's going to do what other Bluetongue virus serotypes do, and so we need to be on our guard against that particular serotype. France had approximately 33,000 cases of Bluetongue virus serotype 8 and about another 5,000 cases of 1. And one of the main problems there was, of course, that they didn't have a vaccine early enough. And once they established the vaccine, it proved that in those areas where vaccination was taken up at a high level, the disease was controlled quite quickly. And similarly in the Netherlands, they had less cases there, but again, once vaccination was imposed, the disease was controlled relatively quickly.
So we have a weapon for combating 8 with a vaccine, but 1 and 6 are still out there, aren't they, and really knocking on our doors. And you, as a practitioner, do you feel as though you're not fully equipped to deal with these types over here?
We are worried. I think we are equipped from a sort of a knowledge point of view, and being, from a surveillance point of view, we are very, very aware of it. And as a result of that, I think that does give us a strength and does give us an advantage in this little battle. I mean, unfortunately, our limitation is that we can't go ahead and impose a vaccination program, even though there is vaccine available in Europe.
Those suspect cases up and down the country, and the one particularly in Poole, which do cause the alarm. I mean, importing these animals from regions which may have the virus is nonsense, isn't it?
I just think it's ludicrous. I just think it's a totally unnecessary risk, really, that we're putting ourselves under.
And one of the things I've been reading about is maternal transmission. There's some evidence shows that this may take place. And it would be one mechanism for carrying it over from one season to the next, through the winter when the midge is not active, for instance, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, and again, that's a worry. Because one of the things we don't know enough about these viruses anyway. We don't know enough about Bluetongue virus serotype 8 in particular. And one of the worries we had was how did this virus serotype manage to survive over winter? One of the methods could have been by infection during pregnancy. And so it basically survives in the womb undetected until the calf is born, and that certainly is a very, very good and very efficient, from the virus point of view, means of actually establishing itself and sort of maintaining itself and infecting another herd and infecting another country.
Just tell me a bit more about those symptoms and maternal transmission. What things might farmers recognise from this?
Yeah, there are a number of other things that are seen with that mechanism, Peter, basically, one of which is something called a dummy calf. So infection has occurred maybe not in the first part of pregnancy, so halfway through pregnancy, the calf is sort of semi-developed, but it has an effect on brain development. So you get a calf which basically is a little bit stupid, difficult to suck, behaves a bit peculiarly, may hang back, and also, interestingly enough, doesn't grow very well either. Other symptoms that they might pick up will be something called blue eye, where there's a slight blue tinge to the eye. The cornea is affected by a certain complex that's built up, and that gives these calves sort of blue eyes. And you also get another syndrome called stargazing, where again there's a brain development disorder, and the calf actually does sort of show that sign of sort of neck arching and looking up towards the stars.
But I was reading somewhere we can actually get a Bluetongue positive calf from a Bluetongue negative cow. So how does that work?
It's all about a time of infection in a pregnant animal, Peter, basically. If infection of that virus occurs early on in pregnancy, and it does something called transplacental transmission, which in other words it crosses the placenta and infects the developing fetus, you can then, at the end of that gestation, a calf is born that is basically virus positive. So it's a Bluetongue virus positive animal, and effectively is a carrier animal really. Whereas the mother, who would obviously have been blood tested if she was being imported, would quite probably, almost definitely, actually blood test as negative of the virus, even though she would contain antibodies to the virus.
All right, so that could be one mechanism, but apart from the vaccination approach itself, is there anything else producers can do to help minimise the risk?
Yes, I think just total vigilance of the disease, just total awareness of the disease, looking for symptoms, obviously reporting any suspect symptoms to us is a very sort of key message to get across, and just be aware of the fact that we don't want to miss this disease if it's emerging on any one of our farms. And the other the most important other method is basically midge control. And we need to be making sure that we keep things as clean as possible to minimise those breeding sites where those little midges are going to sort of develop.
And when people do the vaccination programme, one of the problems they run into, and presumably you do, meeting a lot of farmers, is when they're running another vaccination programme for some other virus of some sort, IBR or BVD or something like that, and they're supposed to keep a window either side the Bluetongue vaccination, aren't they? What do you advise in those circumstances?
It's a very important point, and it's very difficult because a lot of producers will have a number of vaccines to administer to their animals as part of their herd health plan, as part of their sort of vaccine program. What our advice basically has been that I think we need to be as practical as possible. So I think what we have to do is to discuss with your veterinary surgeon how Bluetongue vaccination can be integrated into that herd health program as practically and as efficiently as possible. And I think you just need to look at seeing how you can sort of combine certain treatments together, but it certainly does need discussion with your veterinary surgeon.
What do you think the chances of us contracting the disease are this summer?
I'm an optimist, and because of the response of our clients and certainly the response of farmers in the south of England last year, I have no reason to believe at all that we are going to be complacent. We are going to sort of take the vaccine, we're going to roll it out, we're going to believe that vaccination works, and vaccination is our best and only method of control. And I think if we do that, and if we're sensible with midge control measures, hopefully we'll keep the disease at bay. But I think our biggest trap is complacency. We must avoid complacency. It is a war. We've started the first battle. We committed to the first battle last year. We committed the most expensive part of the planning process and the cost last year. So now it's a question of carrying on and defeating this disease.
So it's a battle we've won first round, Andrew, but there's a whole war to be fought yet.
That's right.
Thanks, Andrew. Now I want to turn to Intervets and Shearing Ploughs vet Ian Anderson to see what he has to tell us about the disease.